So, I was making this video about Endgame the other day, when, like a bolt of lightning, it suddenly hit me. I know, right? 10 years. So, it seemed right to take a look back at Thor, and see how it holds up. So let's get to it. Here are my scholarly thoughts. So, easy stuff first. If there's a spot where even a great film will show wrinkles, it's gonna be special effects. And I was fully expecting some of Thor's CGI to be dated. However, much to my delight, the effects are still holding up. But of course, by 2011, a lot of big studios basically had this stuff down. The work on Asgard and Jotunheim is truly breathtaking. The Bifrost sequences are still spellbinding and used in tasteful moderation. The Destroyer was better than I remembered, in no small part due to the animation of the character, the creativity of its fight scenes, and the use of excellent practical elements. The Frost Giants and Frost Beast, yeah, that's its name, still look really good, as does the action overall. Some of the scenes employ a skillful shaky cam, particularly in the hospital fight, where the shake gives the feeling of chaos but never seems to be a compensation for low-quality stunting or prevents us from following the scene. The choreographies aren't visually complex like something from The Matrix, but they impart the raw power of the hero and build up to some pretty epic moments, while always keeping the focus on the emotional beats of the story. The idea of a Thor movie was kicking around various studios since about 1990. Apparently, Sam Raimi of Spider-Man fame pitched an idea for one to Stan Lee and 20th Century Fox, but nothing came of it. By 2007, Mark Protosevich had written a script and Matthew Vaughn was set to direct, but was released from the project in 2008. Later that same year, the highly regarded Irish filmmaker Kenneth Branagh was hired to direct the film. Apparently, it was a bit of a surprise that he agreed to direct a comic book film, but it also seems he was a big fan of the character in his childhood. Meanwhile, Iron Man had been a smash success, breaking box office records, no doubt helping Thor to really get some traction. And the film was finally released in 2011, starring relative newcomers Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, and was the fourth film in the then budding Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thor stands out from the rest of the Marvel pantheon in that he's based on a deity of the same name from the Old Norse religions. The primary source for these stories being two collections in Old Norse called the Prose Edda and Poetic Edda, both written in the 13th century, although their authors only set down stories that had been passed down orally for far longer, giving Thor a very special legacy to draw from and some crossover with other cultural movements of the 20th century. Oh, by the way, have you ever heard Thor pronounced with the correct Icelandic accent?
Thor is Thor. Very strong R. Thor.
Anyway, put together by some very reputable craftsmen, Thor's plot isn't exactly complicated. It's similar to films like E.T., The Day the Earth Stood Still, or Narnia, as it's a fish-out-of-water story where characters from the mundane world encounter someone extraordinary. At least, that's how it starts. But suddenly, the scene changes, and we're dropped into the Middle Ages in a battle between frost giants and Asgardians while Odin narrates. All at once, this has become a fantasy film that puts the focus on the stranger from the sky, not on the ordinary characters who found him. A simple choice, but very effective at adding some spice to a familiar plot that might have got tired fast and making sure we get lots of what we came for. Thor. By showing us the story in this way, we get to know him by observation, and the film has to hook us by making him interesting rather than mysterious. Now, to watch Thor is to really view two movies at once, seamlessly intertwined, both with different color palettes and even camera techniques. Asgard is generally depicted with softer lighting and patient camera work, while the Earth is brighter and often more frenetic, and the contrast is immediate. In the opening, we're treated to lots of shaky cam, which makes the movie look slightly low budget, but in Asgard, the camera becomes steady, showing us the sweeping splendor of the great city, setting the epic apart from the mundane. Once the backstory is established and Thor gets to Earth, the two worlds are presented in equal measure as we follow Thor's quest to reclaim his hammer, along with Jane trying to understand who he is, while in Asgard, Loki's schemes come to fruition, as he also makes some rather startling discoveries about himself.
Loki is Loki. Loki.
So, yeah. The film balances the two stories very well and sets up a lot of contrast in subtle but effective ways. The Earth characters, who might have been boring and mundane, are reaching for lofty goals.
So you're the one who's always pushing me to chase down every possibility, every alternative.
I'm talking about science, not magic.
Well, magic's just science that we don't understand yet. Arthur C. Clarke.
Who wrote science fiction?
A precursor to science fact.
In some cases, yeah.
Well, if there is an Einstein-Rosen bridge, then there's something on the other side, and advanced beings could have crossed it.
While the Asgardians are motivated by far more basic ideas even when arguing about who sits on the throne.
The old ways are done. You'd stand giving speeches while Asgard falls.
You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy!
And you are an old man and a fool!
In short, the film finds the extraordinary in the everyday, and the commonplace in the fantastic, never letting the godly Asgardians become alienating or the normal people become boring. The use of comedy offsets the serious scenes but manages to not make the film into a complete joke, which is always a problem with this kind of material. A good example of this is the lifting of the hammer. It's a critical and very serious plot point, but the film comfortably has fun with that in the scene with the locals before reminding us how serious the situation is. Personally, I think this is a cue some of the more recent Marvel films could learn from, but I digress. As with the choice to show us Thor's backstory up front, the same can be said of most of the major twists concerning Loki's schemes. We're never left wondering what is going on, but rather why it is, and what will the characters do in response. Because we know where Thor comes from, the scenes with Jane and Eric trying to figure out where Thor is from are more about character development and less about plot. The same way that once we learn what Loki is up to, we watch his schemes unfold and can agonize over the deceptions that keep us in suspense. Because, as Hitchcock said, suspense is created by giving us information.
4 people are sitting around a table, talking about baseball, whatever you like. 5 minutes of it, very dull. Suddenly, a bomb goes off, blows the people to smithereens. What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock. Now take the same scene and tell the audience there is a bomb under that table and will go off in 5 minutes. Well, the whole emotion of the audience is totally different because you've given them that information that in 5 minutes' time that bomb will go off. Now the conversation about baseball becomes very vital because they're saying to you, don't be ridiculous, stop talking about baseball, there's a bomb under there. You've got the audience working.
By making Loki the proverbial bomb under the table, we are kept in suspense, and our interest is held by what the characters will do. This movie has 2 plots, 2 sets of characters. Thor is, as if the title didn't give it away, the most important character, but I'm gonna save him for last. Trust me, it'll make more sense that way. Instead, let's start with Odin.
So Odin is Odin in Icelandic.
Right, so let's start with Odin, the All-Father of Asgard. Anthony Hopkins delivers the role with intensity, or patience as the scene requires, and lives up to the title of Allfather. In a world of gods, he makes them all look like children. Just the way he single-handedly tosses Heimdall his sword oozes displeased dad. I had honestly forgotten what a good job he did in this movie. Apparently there were complaints that his performance was too tame, but I don't get where that's coming from. In many ways, the story starts with him, as, perhaps without intending it, he sets his 2 sons against each other. He has 2 sons, but says,
"When one of you will have to defend that peace. Only one of you can ascend to the throne, but both of you were born to be kings."
Making him potentially the source of the conflict and the one caught between the warring brothers. It would have been easy to make Odin either too perfect or too flawed, but he's treated like an understandable man, and it always feels like there's more to him than what we see. He's definitely a force for good, but isn't beyond making mistakes.
"You're my son. I wanted only to protect you from the truth."
What?
Because I'm the monster parents tell their children about at night? You know, it all makes sense now why you favored Thor all these years. Because no matter how much you claim to love me, you could never have a frost giant sitting on the throne of Asgard.
Since Thanos eclipsed every prior MCU villain a few years ago, I had forgotten how Loki used to be a major threat in these movies. To prepare for the role, Kenneth Branagh advised Tom Hiddleston to study Peter O'Toole in The Lion in Winter and Lawrence of Arabia. I have to say that Tom is a great reason to watch this movie, and gets quite a lot of screen time. In some ways, his story in Asgard is similar to Thor's on Earth, in that he's a fish out of water. The difference is, he's in his own home.
Look around you, we're outnumbered.
Know your place, brother. What happened? Silver tongue turned to lead?
While Thor is respected and all set to become the official heir to the throne, Loki seems like an outcast, and it's likely been that way his whole life. The early scenes set him up as rather ineffectual, while in truth he's the master deceiver. Of course, longtime fans will know what's coming, and the film wisely doesn't make us wait long before revealing his true nature while keeping up a facade long enough to surprise anyone not familiar with the comics or the mythology. A rare case of a film having its cake and eating it too. And I think this was a wise choice, especially considering how many superhero movies from that time would give us only glimpses of quintessential characters. Here, we get full-blown Loki, while still seeing him sufficiently humanized to be worthy of a feature film. He is a product of his environment, but is also hard-hearted enough to be definitely the villain. By the time Frigga explains Odin's choice to not tell Loki of his true heritage, it's already too late. Loki has felt different his entire life, and things have hit a boiling point. Branagh and Hiddleston succeeded in making him both pitiable and villainous. The stinger at the end is very much in keeping with the nature of this film to respect our intelligence. With an Avengers film due next year, keeping his return secret would have been a bit pointless.
Loki's always been one for mischief, but you're talking about something else entirely.